Jamie Fitzgerald, Polk County Auditor and Commissioner of Elections. Going through the budget quickly. For the new members, you've paid our bill when you were on city council or mayor. So this is the year we actually get reimbursed by the city and schools for holding elections for them. On primary years, with Democrat, Republican on the ballot, we pay for that for whether it's state, county, federal. So this is the year actually we get reimbursed. So our first number, the estimated revenue, a lot of that's going to be, that 731 is going to be $310,000 coming from the city and schools to conduct their elections. We have an estimated requested expense at $8.6 million, 48 current FTEs, and we are currently about $78,000 over budget target, which includes our decision package. Oops. Okay, I've already screwed this up. So some of the changes we have, again, are going to be the municipal, getting refunded for holding their elections, some miscellaneous adjustments, and one of the things we see as falling revenue are the transfer tax. There's less real estate changing hands, so that's a little bit less money in from our budget, along with a few other budgets. Our expense, going through the expense request, again, the municipals on there are personal services. You see that in everyone's budget, along with the big numbers eliminating the new voting equipment, which we purchased last year. That will go into effect this year. Voters will see very limited changes, but that's one of the things that we did expend $2.2 million on last year. We're very excited. Much like anything else, technology has a shelf life. They worked fine for the 2024 election, but it is a shelf life. Our general election expense for overtime, extra help of $573,000. We won't need that for the city and school. Surprisingly, they're not as well funded as regular elections, so we'll see a lot less early voting, we'll see a lot less satellites, and definitely a lot less overtime. We do have the $82,000 less in maintenance. Our maintenance agreements, that's the new voting equipment. So since it's brand new, we don't have to pay for the maintenance, so that's at least somewhat helpful. Along with our decision package, that's the poll pads. That's the, when you go in to vote, that's the thing that checks you in. We've had those for a number of years, as opposed to trying to swing for the fences and buy them all at once. We proposed a rollout plan of $150,000 over the course of the next 4 or 5 years that will allow us to move technology and to ensure that everything goes without a hitch. Recent accomplishments, in a couple years ago, the legislature passed House File 718, and that required us to send out notifications through the Department of Management to every taxpayer. And that was a very short window we had. We worked with the Department of Management, but we proofed 161,000 of those in a very limited amount of time. We sent them out. These aren't your tax bill. These are simply to tell you when public hearings are. I'm assuming they're revamping these again. I see there's a couple legislative proposals that will make this a lot more expensive, but this is one of the things that our tax department took on and went quickly with. We also went through and tried to find any errors in our databases. Maybe we had marked with a C as opposed to a K. We'd work on that. We also helped with legislation. If you had a lot of properties, you didn't get, if you had 1,000 properties, you didn't get 1,000 envelopes. Everything came in one. So that's one of the accomplishments we did, along with...
Jamie, what was the cost, do you remember, of that required mailing?
I believe it was $135,000,
yeah.
right around that
It's a gift
part.
that just keeps giving.
We're going to have that every year. So that's coming up again.
Okay.
And we'll meet that head on as well. This will be a little different because as it hits, there'll also be, this is a reassessment year for the assessor. So there'll be a little bit more enthusiasm probably coming in.
That's a kind word.
Pardon?
That's a kind word. Enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So we also have successfully conducted the 2024 election. We had record turnout at our polling sites. We had the 3rd highest turnout for absentees. We were only, frankly, just a little bit under 2,000 voters, less than the 2020 election, which we thought would be the highest we ever had. So there's a lot of turnout that we were able to take care of. We had 11,000 people make changes at the polling sites. That could be name changes, that could be registrations, that could be active to inactive. There's a lot of things that we were doing on election day. We also installed new security. We had that discussion with the previous board about, a lot of places are locking down. So we actually have a buzz-in to get into our office, like similar to a lot of the offices here, along with locking down our elevator and having actually a security guard during voting times. So we actually worked with Rodney to get a security guard over. It was extremely helpful to us. They were out of the way, but made sure that everything went smoothly. We did purchase our new voting equipment. This will get away from the modems that people about 4 blocks away from us don't like. We'll do QR codes now. We'll be one of the first, if not the first county in the nation to do this. It's already been approved by the Secretary of State, and we'll debut that in our March special elections that we have set up. We had 3 senior employees retire, 70 years of walking out the door. We were able to, successfully, with the 2 in front of you, and another person, get people into those jobs that with a smooth transition, which, when you lose institutional knowledge, it's very difficult.
Yes.
But they've managed perfectly.
They have.
And one of the other things that we've done is we've looked at when bills are due from the federal government and wait till the deadline to pay, as opposed to paying early, which has garnered $313,000 of interest income for the county. We've just started doing that, so I guess every little bit will help, but that's just one thing we're doing. Our upcoming opportunities and considerations, we're going to implement a new P-card purchasing program. The P-cards are similar to what they do at Iowa State and Iowa. These are like a payment plus through U.S. Bank. So vendors, it's voluntary. They will get a credit card, and we'll load the credit card up, and they'll get paid a little sooner. So they don't get a paper check they have to go deal with. They sign up for this, and that's actually, the fees are shared between us and U.S. Bank. So it does generate a little bit of revenue for us. They're going to try to roll it out a little bit bigger now, but it's a program that just needs a little expansion. But I think we made about $60,000 using that program. Like I said, it's a voluntary program for the vendors, and they sign up for it, but they get paid a little quicker. They don't have to deal with the paper checks. We'll roll out our new voting equipment. In long term, I don't think this is anything new because it's been in the news, looking at some options for our election office. As you know, we've had a couple studies to go through if it's structurally sound. We have invested a lot of money in that building, but it's really up to whether it's structurally sound or not. And that's a decision that, we've talked to a number of you about already, and, just kind of wait to see what happens. Any questions?
Jamie, the iPads, you're going to roll those in over 5 years then?
It's 4 or 5 years, yes.
4 or 5 years,
Yep.
okay. And as you roll the old ones out, you bring the new ones in, does it create any compatibility issues from?
Our staff says no. They think they'll all be compatible. I mean, ideally, we'd like them all at once,
Yeah.
but it's just not economically feasible.
Right.
To ask, every office, can they make we need $1 million here or there.
Right.
But this, I think, will give us the opportunity to make sure at least we have one new one at each site.
Yeah.
And, we've had 0 problems with these, but like I said, technology has a shelf life.
Yeah.
And we want to kind of beat the shelf life before it gets too bad.
Yeah. Well, I think you do an amazing job. You ran a lot of people through your office this fall, and I mean, for the election, and I think it went off without a hitch, and I heard positive comments
Good.
from the public about it.
Jamie, where are we on the, or maybe I should ask Scott, where are we on the building?
So I don't want to steal Scott's thunder, but we've had our second structural engineer come through, and they need to open up more walls to get a better look at what they need to see. And I believe they've worked with Scott and Frank on that, and we assume in the next 3-4 months we'll get another either good or bad news.
Okay, thank you. Great job.
For those of us that are new, what are you looking for? the building.
Are you, a question on the structural?
Yeah.
That'd be more of a Scott question, but.
Scott Ork, General Services. So the 120 building is old and it's been inundated with water from time to time over its lifetime. And there's a lot of deterioration in the mortar joints. I called a structural engineer at the request of the board and had some just superficial photography done. Some of the lintels are starting to roll off their piers and things like that. The building is starting to move and teeter. The windows are horrible. There's a lot that needs to happen there. So I'm faced with two choices, and I'll be talking to Frank about this at some point. Choice number one, in order to see, because the way they built those buildings, there's brick veneer on the outside, then there's structural stuff on the inside in the middle, and then on the inside of the building, there are parged concrete walls. So you really can't see what's in between the two, and that's where largely a lot of the problem has probably taken place. So it would be costly and sort of tough to take out. I would have to take big sections of brick out of the wall so they could inspect that. Joe Feldman with OPN Architects just now told me the other day that he's got a guy that has a kind of a sonar device or a kind of a device that lets you kind of see behind walls and things like that. I'm not familiar with that yet, and I don't know what the price is. But we're at the point now where that building is compromised enough that I think it makes sense to really give it a solid examination and a diagnosis and leave the board with some choices on what really needs to happen to make that a structurally sound place to work. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jamie? Jamie, thank you very much.
Much.
And guess we'll, Deb, are you next, or is, medical examiner, Dr. Deol, how you doing?
Good morning.
That's it.
Well, esteemed members of the board and colleagues, it's a pleasure to meet everyone. This is my first time being able to speak before many of you, so a brief introduction. My name is Dr. Rory Deol. I just took a new position as the Chief Medical Examiner for Polk County, and I am a native Iowan, returning home after a long decade plus of training and early work experience. So my wife and I were very happy to be back home. I just spent the last year working for the Iowa Office of the State Medical Examiner under the excellent leadership of Dr. Dennis Klein, and recently took this position with Polk County. So I'm excited for the opportunity to serve not only the board, but also the citizens in the community of Polk County, and I look forward to what we can do together.
Welcome, we're glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you. So to jump right into it, I'll say that I'm still adjusting to learning a lot of new things, which will probably be explained in the brevity of my presentation here, but I'm willing to answer any questions you might have along the way. For our first slide, we have the fiscal year 25-26 budget request. This is largely reflective of the current budget year and just some additions to the cost of living and other personal services that I'll get to on the later slides. And our estimated revenue is $447,000. The requested expense is $4.141 million, and our current FTEs are 16 total. There are no decision packages to consider for this proposal. On the next slide, we represent that there's a revenue decrease compared to the current fiscal year of $66,000. So that is resultant from some changes in trend due to projected trends based on actual numbers from prior fiscal years, and that's represented through autopsy fees adjusted. We expect an increase in $30,000. Cremation fees adjusted to trend, we expect a decrease in about $60,000. And then lastly, miscellaneous adjustments, which will lead to a decrease of about $36,000. Total representing that $66,000 change. On the following slide, the expense request shows the expense increase compared to the current budget. The only changes that we're requesting at this point are due to personal services. So it's cost of living adjustment, step merit, health insurance, and IPERS. And that is a total of $104,000 to cover those needs. And as I mentioned, no decision packages to consider. On this slide, I'll briefly go over some of our recent accomplishments, and I certainly can't take credit for these. This is reflective of the great staff at the Medical Examiner's Office, and they've been able to uphold high-quality standards during their time there. Of note, Polk County completed 1,585 death investigations within the county, and of that, 424 of those came to Polk County for an examination. I do expect that number to go up, not just reflective of the population increase in Polk County, but also due to some jurisdictional changes where more of those cases will come to Polk County rather than to the state medical examiner's office. During that time, we also signed 2,760 cremation permits, which represents a significant revenue for the office. Trends nationally show that more people are choosing cremation as an option, and that will require more observation and analysis from our office and signature from the county medical examiner to approve those cremation permits. And also will have the compounding effect of the increasing population of the most populous county in the state. Next, we are fully staffed. We're near fully staffed at this time. We do have some openings for lead death investigator and office manager, and it does say that we're welcoming a new ME. That's me. I feel like it's a little awkward for me to tout that as an accomplishment. So I'll lead that for the next slide when we talk about opportunities, because that's more where I see myself in this role. Next, there are, if we could go back to that slide real quick. So we've had 5 staff attend national conferences in the last year. This is essential to keep up with emerging trends in forensics. It's a medico-legal laboratory setting, so there's a lot of emerging trends we need to keep up with, whether this is evidence collection, changes in law, either nationally, state, and county, and emerging technologies such as DNA collection that can be used now or possibly in the future to help solve crimes or mysteries related to causes of death. And in that time, we've also had 2 of our staff become ABMDI certified. This is the organization that certifies and accredits medical legal death investigators, of which we have 8 full-time positions. So I think it's a great expansion in our capabilities and what we can offer to the community to continue to receive that type of certification within our staff. And then lastly, we've developed more interdisciplinary agency interactions through various community groups and review teams. Of note, the Child Death Review Team, which is a statewide operation that looks at any pediatric-related deaths in the state in order to uncover trends, so that our goal being to understand those better and hopefully lead to reduction in these negative outcomes. Also, working with the local major medical centers to have trauma review teams in order to help those care teams who are working with these people while they're still alive to better understand maybe new methods of treatment or means to increase survival in the patient population. And I believe that's an important piece of the puzzle that we can provide, and I'm happy that we're part of that collaborative effort now.
So in the child death review teams, are those being assembled at the state level or at the county level?
So I believe that the team itself is being assembled at the state level, and that we as a county are representing a large number of cases for the state.
They were set up in the code and they were disbanded, and then that was one of the things I know we tried to reinstitute them, especially with a lot of the child death problems that we were having in the DHS system. So I appreciate knowing that and whatever role we can play in that. That's
Absolutely.
important.
Yeah, I'm happy to be a part of it. And I think it's one of those unique teams where you bring in a lot of experts of various areas, from social workers, healthcare providers, medical examiners, and we can all understand each other's position better in this chain of events in order to make this more secure and reveal trends that we can hopefully ameliorate.
Yeah.
Lastly, we are also involved in county and statewide conferences such as the Iowa Association of the County Medical Examiners. I presented a stage presentation this past year while at the state office, and I hope to continue that in the future as my role as the Polk County Chief Medical Examiner. Okay, next slide, please. So, near-term opportunities and long-term opportunities and considerations. We're starting renovation on a space within Broadlawns Hospital. That's currently where we're housed. And this new renovation, the idea of it is to bring together the different arms of our agency into one office. So this will increase collaboration, communication, and ultimately it will increase turnaround time for decedents who enter into our care. We hope to return them back to their families and for funeral services as soon as possible. And we're hoping that this will be a means that we can help accomplish that. Now we can talk about me joining the office. I feel like an opportunity is a better way to call this. This is an opportunity for me to show you my experience and expertise. It's an opportunity for our office to demonstrate to the community the level of care, scientific investigation, and legal investigation that we will provide to every death that comes under our jurisdiction, and make sure that we're meeting the highest standards that are available to us in the state, county, and the nation. And then lastly, we'll continue to recruit for a second forensic pathologist. Being the most populous county in the state, we see the highest number of deaths in the state. For a sense of perspective, the Iowa State Office of the Medical Examiner, they had about 1,600 examinations last year, covering 97 counties in Iowa. I expect this coming year we'll have about 550 in Polk County. In order to accomplish that task, the state hired 6 full-time forensic pathologists. As of right now, I'll be the only forensic pathologist at the Polk County Medical Examiner's Office. By hiring a second pathologist, will help reduce that strain on a single individual and maintain high quality of care for everyone. And then our
So
long.
what is the recommended ratio?
So that's a good question. The National Association of Medical Examiners accredits medical examiner agencies. We're currently in the process of applying for that accreditation and trying to meet their standards. In order to do that, they recommend that a forensic pathologist should strive to complete 250 exams per person. The chief medical examiner has understood that they're going to have more administrative duties, and they reduce that number to about 200. We can relieve that strain by having an additional forensic pathologist come on full-time or hire contract physicians that can come in and help us in moments of strain there. And going along with that idea, with trying to achieve this accreditation from the National Association of Medical Examiners, we look forward to the future to designing and building a new facility. I think that there are workflow considerations, preservation of evidence, and preservation of consideration for the county citizens with being able to provide them with good turnaround time and high quality care that a future facility could help us accomplish, as well as accomplish accreditation by the National Association of Medical Examiners. And that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Do you think it's, I know forensic pathologists are hard to come by.
Yes.
So will it take us a while to get to your goal?
I anticipate it will. So out of the 8 forensic pathologists practicing in the state of Iowa right now, I believe 5 of us were raised in Iowa. So you really see like a grassroots cultivation of education and then bringing people back to the state. I represent one of those. With working with DMU, we have students coming through the office all the time. We can help foster that interest, but you can't really capitalize it for 8 years until they complete their training from that point. And historically, nationally, there are about 450 forensic pathologists practicing in the country, and the CDC estimates we need about 2,200.
We only have how many?
450. There's a significant deficit that we're trying to overcome, and many nations, many agencies in the nation have had hirings open for a year and a half, 2 years before they find those positions filled. So I think that that is probably more appropriate for our long-term goals, but we're going to start it in the short term.
How are you gonna manage, I guess, from the standpoint if we have 550 autopsies to perform and you can do up to maybe 250, then will the state be participating with us in those?
They have expressed their interest in being able to help provide a support in looking out for the greater good of the state and all of our citizens. Additionally, I had been working as a contractor with Polk County on and off to help relieve strain when there was an excess number of cases. So we would look to that similar arrangement to see if there's somebody who's licensed, board certified for the state of Iowa, that they can come in on a contract basis and provide coverage for us during that time.
Okay, great.
Along those lines, on your long-term goal, new facilities, because of your unique career path and coming from the state, do you, as we move forward, there has to be some economy of scale here of working closer with the state here in Polk County. So I'm going to be very interested in your thoughts as we move forward on standalone facility or co-location, the ability to provide a greater service to all the taxpayers. So just putting that out there, but I like your unique path, and you've got insight into both of those, and I do think there's a need to try to bring the two parties, our two units together. Open discussion on that.
Yeah, I look forward to those discussions. I do think that I bring a unique perspective, having worked for the state office and now working for Polk County, that I think that there's also a benefit to standardizing workflow and process by understanding some of the problems that the state has figured out and solved, and then adopting some of those same procedures as well. I look forward to that.
There's a lot of history behind that I'm sure he'll be able to enlighten you on, and we've been down that path. So I think our best move is designing a new building as we've had we have money set aside to do that, and we're hoping to do that sooner than later as your long-term.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, I thought you might.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for your time. Oh, yeah.
Adding the pathologist, maybe let the board know how much the state charges per autopsy to kind of quantify why that need is.
So they'll charge around $2,000 per autopsy. At the minimum, if there's an additional amount of testing needed, either because there are esoteric drugs, which we're seeing more and more on the streets, that will increase the amount of testing. If it's anything that's going to be more contentious and require expert examination of organs such as the brain and heart, that will increase the amount of cost for the testing as well.
And the length, why don't you talk about the length of time?
Yeah, there's a considerable amount of turnaround time, and it's related to the lack of the number of experts available in the field. So if we want to send somebody's brain for tissue examination, the University of Iowa is often a facility we work with, and they're great at turning around cases in as fast a time as they can, given their workload as well. But you may look at 2 to 3 months on the short end. Some agencies I've worked with have seen 6 to 9 months for specialist examinations. And during that time, I can't sign the death certificate, I can't provide the family's closure, and I can't give a full estimation of what we need in order to provide that information.
But as I understand it, when we checked into this state versus, having in Polk County, when we talked to the funeral homes and others, they about came out of their shoes thinking that we would move that up to the state because it takes longer for their loved ones to get the autopsy done and then back to the funeral home, buried, blah, blah, blah. But in Polk County, we work a lot quicker.
I'd have the freedom to triage cases to meet the needs of the community as well as law enforcement and prioritize those cases. I would be the single go-to that they could go to for answering their questions, providing testimony, answering questions from family. Additionally, the state is also dealing with staffing shortages just like the whole nation is, but they're receiving cases from 97 other counties, and it's first come, first served basis. So
Right.
I think the fastest way to address cases would be if they were internally here in Polk County.
Yeah, there's no question our services in Polk County are so much better. And it's no fault of the states, they're just bigger and they got a lot more cases
True.
to deal with.
In terms of design building, I mean, I'm not talking about complete integration, but you could co-locate a building. I mean, you could go inhabit a building, right?
I'm open to discussions of multiple possibilities. I like to go into any of these problem-solving operations just thinking that let's hear all the ideas and start stratifying pros and cons and seeing what works best. We can solve short-term problems and we can solve long-term problems, and it really takes a collaborative effort to evaluate.
All right, I like that approach, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Deb, I know you like to be in front of people with the microphone, so have at it.
Thank you. It is one of my favorite opportunities. So I'm Deb Anderson, the budget manager for Polk County. I'm here to present this morning the Board of Supervisors budget. For Polk County, any revenue or expense that doesn't directly correlate with the services offered by a different office or department generally is accounted for in the board's budget. Therefore, you see very large numbers in our budget, even though we're a staff of just 19. We have estimated revenue of $266 million, which is primarily property taxes. We also have requested expense of $64 million, which is primarily debt service, and 19 FTEs. The revenue estimate for the upcoming fiscal year is an increase of $1.6 million, and that is largely due to an increase in the taxable valuation. I've kind of broken that out there for you for the general basic fund. We did see a 3.5% increase in our tax base, which would generate about $3.7 million more in tax revenue. Due to House File 718, we are required to remove about 1 percentage point from that taxable valuation growth. So we need to adjust our levy rate such that we would have a 2.5% increase in taxable valuation. That adjustment takes about $1 million off of our estimated revenue. Additionally, we would have another year of phasing out the commercial and industrial tax replacement. Several years ago, the state rolled back the valuation of commercial industrial properties to 90% of their assessed value. And then over 5 years now, they used to replace that, so we were made whole. It's about $6.5 million in total that the county received because of that replacement. Several years ago, they started phasing out that replacement over a 5-year period. So another $600,000 comes off of the general basic fund in the upcoming fiscal year. What you see then for the general basic fund, which is our primary operating fund for next year, is an increase of around $2 million in new tax revenue. Other adjustments in the general, in our revenues are about $3.4 million coming in from the Des Moines Airport and economic development loan repayments. As you recall, in 2024, we issued bonds for the airport, and this would be the first year that they start paying principal as well as interest. We also are putting in there some adjustments for loans that we made to Genesis and to the YMCA. We had given them a temporary deferment on those loan repayments. The deferment expires, and we would expect to see some revenues coming back on those loans. In the current year budget, we do have about $1 million budgeted for FEMA reimbursement. That is still lingering from COVID-19. So we're still just hoping to have that brought in this current fiscal year. And then we have a project in place, Northeast Rising Sun. The City of Pleasant Hill was reimbursing 25% of that expense. And so we had about $700,000 budgeted to come in the current fiscal year. Anticipated bond proceeds would decrease slightly next year. This is primarily because the current fiscal year has about $1 million coming in for the school radio projects. And then in the other funds, we have 5 total tax funds. We would continue to see the commercial industrial replacement being rolled out or phased out in those funds as well, which would decrease revenue by about $700,000. And then some miscellaneous adjustments. On the expense side, we have a decrease of about $85 million. The majority of that is going to be for the ARPA and emergency rental assistance programs as well as for debt service. Several years ago, we put about $45 million worth of ARPA lost revenue replacement into the general fund and dedicated that for some specific purposes: mental health, affordable housing, economic well-being, and some water quality projects. Those have all been earmarked. It's just taking time to roll out those projects. So we did roll forward some of that money. And it's assuming that's all expended in 24, 25, it would no longer be available for expenditure in the upcoming year. Also, the emergency rental assistance projects, which I believe Sarah will be talking with you about in a little bit. We also had in the current year budget about $10 million to finish up phase 1 of the Northeast Broadway project and about $3 million for the Rising Sun project. We'd also be finishing up the Resource Center construction in the current fiscal year, so that expenditure would go away in future years, and the Community Betterment and Community Betterment grant carryovers would be eliminated, as well as $1 million that is currently appropriated for the school radio amplifiers. Debt service would decrease significantly. The majority of this is because we issued around $40 million of short-term debt that was for several years of housing projects, Invest DSM, the Broadway, Northeast Rising Sun, solar panels. A lot of those expenditures were short-term debt that we issued, and we would be bringing next year's debt down to just normal levels. I'm also making an adjustment to the community and economic development funds purely based upon our trend. We've been spending slightly less than what I had budgeted, so I'm just making an adjustment to true up those expenditures with actuals. And some miscellaneous adjustments as well, and some expenditure increases for emergency management, hazmat, and Polk County Aviation Authority. And as you've seen in other departments, an adjustment for personal services, COLA, base wage increases, step merit, and benefit cost. And Sarah?
So going through recent accomplishments of the last year, some of you were there for the opening of the Life Services Center on the west side of our As a reminder, our new this facility, we had all services do all of the renovations, dollars, construction costs. It now houses round one, so cancer urgent care, 23-hour crisis center, and facility center, and
Sarah, where are we on the, does anybody know the Cicera Jen Terry's project?
Yes, so she's doing the board staff, I can't remember the date, but the final report is ready to be rolled out, I believe, in March or April. So she wants to present that to you all, and it'll be a very public presentation of their results. She's also working on the report right now, part of her, the funding that she received from ARPA was to address, tap water security in underserved populations, so she has a report on that, and I've been working, with her and a group of folks in the complex to roll out that message. Money, on water, tap water in the state, but the larger report will be getting rolled out in March, April, with all of those tasks, but I'll carry that message to the public.
Okay, great.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I'm gonna have more questions later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.